Incentives. How do we incentivize our workforce? How do we put in a bonus program to incentivize our workforce? We talk about the 7 negotiating hot buttons. Incentives are one of them. As small business owners, we only have 7 ways to negotiate to bring in that talent we need. We can give them a title, we can pay them a salary, we can give them incentives, we can have a great bonus benefit program, we can have a 401k, we can give them PTO, and we can talk about their schedule, whether it's in office, hybrid, or remote. Those are the only 7 things we can negotiate as business owners to bring in that talent. Incentives is one of the big ones. And today we have an expert to come and help us and help you understand a very unique and interesting way to incentivize your employees. My name is Corey Harlock. I am the creator of Key Hire, and I'll be your host here today. Before we get started, if you like these podcasts, please help us out. Subscribe, leave a comment. If you like this episode, give it a 5-star review. We're really trying to get the word out to small business owners, and any help and anything you can do to help us is greatly appreciated. Today, we are talking to someone that I hold in very high regard. I think I've talked before about I'm a proud Vistage member. Formerly and currently, I left for a while. I missed it. I came back and was really fortunate to find a great chair. His name is Chuck Hendee. Chuck, not only is he a great Vistage chair, he's a very successful current and former businessman. He owned a business, sold it to a private equity company, made a good return on that investment, and now has dedicated himself to helping small business owners like myself and hopefully you. And one of the tactics he utilized to motivate his workforce was a concept of gain sharing, not profit sharing, gain sharing, which I found to be super interesting. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can incentivize our workforce through gain sharing. So let's bring them on, Matt. If you can bring Chuck in. Hey, Chuck, how are you?
Great, Corey. Good to be here this morning. Thank you for inviting me and get to talk about one of my favorite subjects.
Well, I know how busy you are, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time to spend with me here today, so we can help some folks and give them, the whole premise of the Key Hires podcast for small businesses to help business owners and give them a different view of the same old stuff. And I thought this was a super cool concept and idea around incentivizing your employees.
Well, I'll tell you, it's something I'm very passionate about because it had a huge impact on our business and its success and ultimate valuation at the sale. So I think it's just a huge opportunity for any business to really dramatically improve its profitability and the relationship with the workforce. So anyway, let's get going.
Yeah. So the first question is an easy one. What the heck is gain sharing?
What the heck is gain sharing? Well, I'll tell you what. Let me back up first. What are incentives all about? And that's really to motivate the workforce to align their performance with the objectives of the company. And of course, really the responsibility of that is on the leadership of the company. So we want to fairly compensate and motivate employees, to contribute to the company's success. So fairly motivating to me is compensating the employee based on the company's gains and not just the profitability. So what's the difference between gain sharing and profit sharing? Well, simplest terms, gain sharing is based upon remuneration or bonus, based upon gains from where you are. So point. If you've been in business 10 years, does it make sense to be sharing the profits of the company with uh, somebody that's only been there 2 or 3 years? But gains, make all the difference. There's if you've ever seen the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where Mark Griswold is anticipating, getting his annual bonus.
Right. And he gets jelly of the month, doesn't he? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
So, where businesses make a huge mistake is not really tying compensation or bonuses, to performance.
And
And
I think,
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off, Chuck, but I think that's
Yeah.
such a good point because a lot of companies just default to a discretionary bonus. And in my experience, I've seen this happen where we brought in a super high impact leader of a department, and what they were used to was a large business with a formal incentive structure that they could measure and see. And it was my bad was that the business owner said we have a very generous bonus we give at Christmas, and I didn't quantify it, and I learned from that. But he said, "Trust me, it's very generous," and that's kind of the information I moved over to the candidate. And this candidate was kind of, their bonus was a percentage of base, let's call it 10%. Let's say they were, earning $150,000 for argument's sake. So they were used to a $15,000 bonus based on performance KPIs. Well, this business owner who was giving discretionary bonuses, their very generous bonus was $5,000 per person. And they gave it to everyone. And in their mind, that was very generous. But the expectation of this individual was very generous. Well, standard to me
And what's generous for you may not be generous for me.
is 15. I'm sorry, I just glitched there. What was that, Chuck?
You kind of froze there for a second, but I got the gist of it that, what's generous for one may not be generous for the other. And what's equitable for one is not equitable for the other. If you just give $5,000 bonuses to all, one tier, have you really fairly compensated somebody for their performance? Did everybody perform at the same exact level?
Right.
And so that's the problem with profit sharing. What happens is the owner has a good year, and they look at it. They got some money in the bank, and they go, okay, we're going to have a bonus, and everybody's going to be happy, and it's going to be a great Christmas and all that. The problem is that nobody can relate what they did to what that bonus represented, and if then they feel like they worked just as hard next year, yet they didn't get as much bonus, or any bonus. So what's with that? So it really creates uh, a problem between the owners and the employees. And maybe the owner had a great year and bought a new Maserati, and you're going to have people that feel like, well, man, I really did a lot to contribute this year because I got that big account, or we did this or that. And, the owner's getting this Maserati. What did I get? So,
Jelly of the month.
jelly of the month. Yeah. So, gain sharing is based upon real gain. So you have to have a real base
Right.
standard, to start with, and then measure the gains and attribute those to, as close as you can, to that actual employee or team or, department's impact on the gain.
Right.
So, the responsibility, of course, is to measure it, and to, have the accounting in place to base the incentive on. There's some real, the simplest way of doing that, of course, is take, keep it simple, stupid, keep it um, as easy as what you can reasonably, put together, at your company, set of financials that relate as much as possible to a particular team or uh,
Right.
working department. And there's easy ways of doing that, which we can get into.
And that's, I wanted to go there, but the comment I wanted to make, just to jump back a bit, is I think that's the problem with discretionary and not measurable incentives is what a business owner can feel is very generous and motivating can actually be demotivating and seen differently by the employees, right? And it can actually
Right.
cause a big divide. So that's why I love the concept of gain sharing. So we've kind of talked about gain sharing. The next question is, what are the biggest mistakes that you could make when implementing gain sharing? Or if we want to flip it over, what are the must do's to kind of set the foundation up correctly so it can be executed on and you can achieve the purpose you're setting out to achieve, which is a motivated workforce?
Well, great questions, and both of them relate to each other, because the biggest mistakes that can be made or fall into two categories. One is setting a bonus system up that's either unachievable or unsustainable. They're
Right.
kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Unachievable, of course, would be uh, that you're going to do. You're going to make 50% higher efficiency than, or double your efficiency from what is standard.
Or Chuck,
That'd
just
be great to do that, right? But is
or
that really achievable?
right, like if someone has if a salesperson, they say you need to grow sales by 10% and they grow it by 50% and they say great, so next year we need you to grow it another 50%, right? They
Yeah.
don't.
Well, that's actually attainable or achievable because they did it right. Uh, but I've seen companies. I did a little work for a company helping them implement an incentive system, and they wanted to. I'll just take one area that they wanted to reduce cost of maintenance for their equipment. It was a machine shop, and that included maintenance of the tools as well as the machinery. So we got that set based upon what their standards were, and uh, and then found that we got the cost accounting data from the completed work orders. Nobody was getting anywhere near the standard. I mean, there was anywhere from 20% below standard to 50% below standard. So I go, where'd you get these standards? Well, that's just what we thought it ought to be. Well, does it make any sense that nobody can attain that?
Right.
So we did some time studies. Is no way anybody could do it. So that's setting an unachievable uh, goal, right? So that isn't fair, and immediately that's going to be seen as unfair. So it's got to be accurate. So that plays into your other your question about how do you establish it that and to be reasonable and fair. Well, obviously you have to measure it. There's I think Peter Drucker said, what is measured is not mastered. So obviously you have to measure things. If a company ought to know what its costs are, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges for um, small to mid-sized businesses that maybe they don't have a sophisticated accounting system. Maybe they have QuickBooks, but they really don't do cost accounting. If you don't do that, then it's hard to set incentives based upon a standard, because if you don't really have an accurate standard, that's a problem. So that's the ways we can get in trouble. You've heard of KPIs, key performance
Right.
indicators. If, if you have good KPIs, then obviously then you've got something to measure
Right.
against. And so that's where we need to start. I think it's good performance standards that are accurate, and then when you pay an incentive based on improving, which is really gain sharing, then you're really providing the opportunity for the workforce to do their magic, and there is magic to a certain extent. In our company, we had a manufacturing company, and initially we set up piece rates for production. Basically, we paid so much, per item that somebody could produce, and the ones we were doing were, an employee could do 2,000 a day, which was pretty good. We developed a new product, a variation on it that was actually more complicated. And when they started, uh, we already knew that the piece rate was a good thing for us and them. So we set our rate, and then we found that uh, after a few weeks, they were able to produce 40% more, or reduce the the labor, the labor hours by 40%. So that's an example of when you if you set a rate, the expectation ought to be that people are going to refine what they do so they can make more, which is good for the company and the employee, which leads us to the other issue that people make the mistake on, is making it an incentive unsustainable. So you have to be just as careful that you don't set the incentive, make it too rich or too high to where it's unsustainable.
For who? For the
company.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought unsustainable where you're working them at such a rate that they can't sustain that work rate for 12 months. You're burning them out, and they're not lasting on the other side. Is that something
that's a problem also? Basically you want to be reasonable.
Got to be fair and equitable on both sides, right?
Right. That's the key to it.
Now, Chuck, we talked a lot about KPIs, and just to go back, I think what I heard you say is, when we're setting these KPIs, one of the big mistakes is just kind of eyeballing it or going on gut. So the setting for gain sharing, the setup sounds like this is key. You got to have the right people come in, and we had talked earlier, everyone doesn't get the same KPIs. The KPIs are kind of department specific, right? So then bringing in the experts, like we both know Nelson, who's a lean guy. So if you have a manufacturing facility and you're not sure about some of your KPIs, having someone like, Apex come in and do some measuring for you and looking at some different things, is that the detail we want to do here, or is that kind of overkill?
No, I think it's a good starting place. I mean, at a minimum, for a manufacturing company or any process, is to go, do some time studies, video the operation, and one of the things people miss is they actually watch the let's say the operation without the setup that comes up between. They miss that part.
Right. Yeah.
It only takes so long to turn this screw into the hole, right? But they had to go pick the screw up and get it ready and get it ready to put, so they miss that. So main thing is be thorough and be fair, and then have a standard, and then have that some comparison with past performance, if you know what that is.
Sure.
If we don't know, then we're starting from scratch with, let's just say, a time study, an analysis of the operation, and you could bring an expert in, like the Apex, or you can just do it yourself. But it's valuable to set the standard, and not to where it's the most Herculean or I guess the most exaggerated, excessive way you could possibly do it.
Right.
But a reasonable standard, like you were saying, where they don't kill themselves, which allows for little alterations in how somebody does the process that can be improved. And usually it's ergonomic or
Sure.
systematic that they're able to refine it to where it's improved. And that's the same with almost any. Doesn't have to be manufacturing. It could be any kind of process.
And it sounds to me like the going through the process of setting up gain sharing gave you greater insight into your business. And let me know, I'm not going to assume, did going through the process of implementing gain sharing give you greater insight into your business? And do you think it made you a better leader of your business in terms of financials and people?
Absolutely. We believed in incentives. We started out with the piece rate, as I mentioned, and then we had incentives for sales, and that's pretty typical. And then profit sharing for, because we made that mistake too. Uh, just distributing something at the end of the year based on having a good year. But the problem, of course, we learned that piece rate bonuses that worked really well. Sales incentives that worked pretty reasonably well. But for everybody else, especially when we grew, we had a lot more indirect employees, and more uh, overhead. We didn't really have anything in place that would really incentivize them to be more efficient or effective at what they did. A lot of times, people really just don't know exactly what you want them to do, and we have a tendency to really focus on, hey, we want to make sure the customer's happy and we're getting production out, but we forget about the other workforce that's less direct. So, uh, fortunately, I was introduced to a guy that had helped implement an incentive system at a pretty large, or what became a really large company, $1 billion air conditioning company. And they implemented this system because they wanted to be the lowest cost provider to be the toughest competitor in the market, which they became. And everything in their company was based upon reducing cost as a percentage of revenue. And this guy helped us implement that system. And so we started with each department's overhead. So we allocated overhead to each department based upon reasonable analysis. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but basically, reduction of overhead in a department allowed for paying a bonus, and we were amazed at the results of that.
Right.
Uh,
And and so that would apply. You talked of direct and non-direct employees. And just to clarify, the non-direct would be maybe the administration side of the business. So
right,
your accountants, your office manager, your human resources, or anyone who's not in operations,
right,
turning a screw or out selling the product, but everyone who's in between there, maybe engineers or whatever.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
And if your company's growing, you're going to have more and more of those type people in your workforce. That are accountants and HR and office management, and they need to be part of the success of the company. I mean, they are part of the success, uh, or lack of. So it's a great benefit to compensate them based upon improvements as well.
For sure. Yeah.
So, one of the things we found, Corey, was that uh, it made it a whole lot easier to manage the company, because once we had this in place and people were being rewarded based upon reducing the overhead in that department, and we paid anywhere from 10 to 20% of the reduction in overhead out to the department, and distributed that among the people in the department based upon their salary as a percentage of total salaries in that department, which is a fair way of distributing it.
Right.
And we had tremendous reductions in overhead. I'll just give you an example I think people can relate to is that when it's busy, managers will say, "Look, I need an extra person to do this or that," and then when it slows down to normal, then those people are still there, or they'll decide, we need some other equipment, business machines. Everybody ought to have their own, fax machine back in the day, and or a printer in every cubicle area,
Right.
and which increases the overhead cost. And when we implemented the incentive for reducing overhead, one, we found that, well, next thing you know, we were getting temp to perm employees to help when it got uh, busy, and then next thing you know, they wouldn't be there. And you go, "What happened to Susie or Bob?" And they go, "Well, we really didn't need them anymore because work slowed back down, and there was a renegotiation of the business equipment leases to where it was advantageous." Um, it became kind of the opposite. Instead of worrying about people exceeding their budget on wanting to hire or buy equipment, we had to push them to hire when they needed or to get
Right.
equipment because they were all benefiting so well from the bonus system. We had just give you a perspective, and I can't attribute all this to just this incentive system, but I think the focus on that, saving cost and really focusing on profitability versus just sales increase. Uh, we had generally a 3% net profit per year for a long time, kind of an average. And over a 2-year period, we grew to 12%, which is
That's really nice.
4x, which was huge. And attribute that to a number of things, but the incentives got everybody working together. Also, they were somewhat independent in their management role of their department, that they wanted, if they could do things that made that department more successful, and therefore each department wanting to do the same, kind of led to the whole company
Right.
being more successful, more profitable, which made my job a lot easier. So that's why I'm so excited and passionate about it, and
Yeah.
love the opportunity to talk about it.
So if I were to summarize, I know we covered a lot here, but the kind of the mistakes that someone might make is not dividing the KPI, doing KPIs kind of by department. And then the second one would be not doing the research or consulting the right people to make accurate KPIs. Kind of going by gut, or here's what I think. And then we touched on it really briefly, but also not just being stuck on, well, this is what it is. You have to be able to go back and say, okay, well, look, we reserve the right to make adjustments as needed to these, because if you guys get really good at what you're doing and or we've made it too hard for you, we need to keep them kind of between the lines and make sure they're fair and equitable on both sides.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. Setting accurate KPIs, that's the start.
Right.
Uh, then you have something to really measure against, but you don't want to make the bonus system so rich. You don't want to err on that side, because then it's really uh, people hate it when you say, "Well, look, we got to reduce this because it's too much." So
Yeah.
you're much better off setting it, lower. I mentioned we had 10 to 20%, so
Right.
we'd set things to be low, and then we could always make it more generous.
Right.
and that's just because you don't know. And if you set overhead bonuses, the the overhead of a department year on year is something you can measure pretty well as a percentage of revenue, because revenue fluctuates.
Right.
So we annualized everything, and then we paid quarterly, and then we would at the quarter we'd pay 50% of what was uh, accrued so far, and
Okay.
put the other 50% in reserve. And then as the year progressed, we would take that reserve and add it back in, and then we ended up with a nice, what was usually a really nice Christmas bonus based on paying off the open balance. Well, that allowed for fluctuations, because you could have a unusually high revenue in a quarter, and then that would look like you ought to get a bigger bonus, and then the
Right.
next quarter falls off. So even in and out. So without making that seem overcomplicated, make it fair to the workforce and make it fair to the company, and
Right.
do the analysis required to set it up in a fair manner. And I think it is valuable, Corey, to have somebody that has some experience in that to coach or mentor,
For sure.
um, and we do that as well.
And we'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah,
To go back, if you make, I immediately thought, if you make the program too rich, now you're paying people big bonuses to not improve the gains as much as you want. So you're actually getting the performance is going to be less, but you're paying out more money. And that's why it's important to get that balance right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
set it up sort of on the lean side, and but not too lean,
Well, it's
and
like
and then so an equitable bonus really is, let's just say, 20% of gains.
okay. That
It should be
makes sense.
reasonably. I mean, the company's keeping 80. The company's taking all the risks, so they should be able to. And there are going to be some times that there's errors made or
Sure.
issues that have to be overcome. So, having that 80% makes it fair. And then you can always pay some more of that out in
Christmas
profit
bonus.
sharing, or right.
That whole what employees and business owners think is fair is a whole other conversation, because a lot of times it's overlooked that the employer, the business owner, is taking a lot of risk, right? But
Absolutely.
we've covered kind of what it is. We've covered what you need to do to get it set up. It could sound a little cumbersome, like a big undertaking. So if I'm a business owner thinking this is something I need to look into, or I want to investigate further, and I know this is something you do, and will absolutely give you a chance to get your information up on here. But if I'm a business owner listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, I want to educate myself on this, what's the first step I should take, or the first few things I need to do to get started?
Well, I could recommend a book, The Great Game of Business.
Okay.
And I got to think of who the author is of that. I think I've got it written down here.
Matt might be able to flash it up here if we give him a second. He's pretty fast.
Jack Stack.
Oh, you beat Matt.
Jack Stack.
Jack Stack, The
The
Great Game of
Great
Business.
Game of Business.
I'm putting it on my to-read list.
And I tell you, the essence of that book is a point that I left out. I didn't mean to, but how important it is to share the data with the workforce. So the team and employee. So you don't want to just set the system up and say, and then here's your bonus. You want to have the collect the data, share the data, share the bonus calculation, and this is usually set up ahead of time, so hey, Corey, when we achieve this, or as we get towards this, you're going to get this percentage of the gain, and here's the calculation here's the percentage, here's the, here's the data, and then here's that report, and here's your check.
Right.
Or if you're the department manager, here's the, here's all the data. And then you as the department manager go, well, hey, gee, that didn't seem like we really spent that much last month. Can I look at that in detail? Absolutely. So come into the accounting department and review the detail, and we might have made a mistake on the accrual or the accounting for that. Or, yep, in fact, we did have that machine failure that had to be repaired, and forgot that, huh? Right. So being able to back up how the calculations were made and how the bonus was calculated, and being completely open about that. And that's what Jack Stack wrote the book about, Great Game of Business. But that gets into detail on the why and a little bit of the how. And then that organization also has coaching and mentoring to go along with that as well. But that's a good place to start. Okay.
And then the next best place to start would be to call you or contact you. So if I'm a business owner and I want to get in touch with Chuck Hendee, how do I do that?
Well, you can probably the best thing to do is look up my website, which you guys may have. There you go. And you could reach me by email. And there you go. I'm very passionate about this, and I care about it. And this is kind of a side thing from what I typically do, because I'm facilitating Vistage peer groups primarily. But I really care about this and how much it can do for business owners, and what a tremendous value it was to me. So I'm willing to help anybody. If they want to go a little deeper on it, I can consult them and support them in a way that I get a fee for. But I'll be glad to talk to anybody initially and steer them in the right direction. And if they're running into a challenge, help them get out of that. Help keep the ship on course.
Awesome. Well, Chuck, I thanks for your time, and I think the information has been amazing and super valuable. And I'm so happy we got introduced, and I was looking for a way to get back into Vistage, and somehow we were I was connected to you, and thankful to be associated with you and in your Vistage group. And I learned a ton. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Corey. And I'll tell you, you couldn't have no chair could have a better member of a group, because of how engaging and edgy you are. And and then even throw in a little of that Canadian language to go along with that.
Some people might substitute the word edgy for pain in the ass, but I'll take it either way. I'm okay.
That's okay. Hey.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. I appreciate your time today.
All right, Corey. Thank you.
All right. There he is, Chuck Hendee. Little sidebar on Chuck. Super humble, but one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. So I absolutely recommend looking him up for a couple things. If you want to learn more about gain sharing, use the email or hit up his website, chuckhendee.com. Or Chuck Hendee, that's his email. What's the website, Matt? Is it just chuckhendee.com? Easy peasy. Ping him up on gain sharing. Anything to do with business, wicked smart in those areas. Or if you're exploring Vistage and you think it's something that would be a benefit to you, and it would be Vistage is an incredible resource if you find a chair that suits your needs. So he's worth talking to on that as well. They have, small business groups. They have CEO groups for larger businesses. We have trusted advisor groups for service providers, but Chuck would be able to, he'd be a great resource for someone to talk to if you're interested in looking into that. So to wrap things up, this is going to be our last live episode for season 1. We actually have a season 1 and it's done. Chuck was our last guest for season 1. We are going to be putting some content out over the summer here, so be looking for that. We have some stuff in the can here that we're going to put out that I think you'll find really, really interesting. If you like this episode, like it, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, give us a rate, give it a 5-star rating, help Chuck and myself out and give us a 5-star rating. We are trying to get our message out, and the way the algorithms work with these platforms is they need action. We need to get some clicks, and we need some comments, we need some ratings. So we would appreciate any help you can do with that. If you want to learn more about Key Hire, how we can help you with your talent strategy or acquisition programs, you can hit us up at our website, keyhire.solutions. Another great way to stay in touch with us is on our LinkedIn page. We're always posting content on the LinkedIn page. You can check out these live streams, the podcasts, and any other information we're putting up there. You can reach out to me personally at Corey@keyhire.solutions, not .com, .solutions. I messed Matt up with that. What else do we have, Matt? We have the YouTube station. No? Oh, check out our YouTube channel, Key Hire Solutions, and we have lots and lots and lots of content up there. But I think that'll wrap up our show for today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We're going to see you in the second Wednesday of August coming up, but stay tuned for some cool content we're going to be posting in the interim. Until next time, stop grinding, start growing. We'll talk to you soon.